So I know I'm a few days late to the party, but in honor of maybe my all-time favorite West Virginia Mountaineer football player making it to the College Football Hall of Fame, I have to make a video about it. Carson Fox for you here for Fox on West Virginia Mountaineer Sports. And yes, I am bringing out the microphone. I've realized on the last couple of my videos that I think that just my voice has been a little too far away from the microphone, so it sounds a little bit odd, look a little bit odd here. I'm just a guy, I'm just a fan trying to bring you better audio. So it sounds better, don't have to deal with my laptop fan. So I hope that this finally rectifies the issues. So I will be holding it for all of my future videos. So, titling this video, a shout out to Super Steve Slaton. As I mentioned, nominated to the College Football Hall of Fame last week as part of the 2025 class, becoming the 8th College Football Hall of Fame member all time for West Virginia University, joining Darryl Talley, Major Harris, Don Nealon, Bruce Bosley, Sam Huff, and then some old school players, Joe Stidahar, Ira Arrett Rogers, and Cliff Battles. So I'm very happy for Steve Slaton, arguably my favorite WVU player growing up, and who I would say really got me interested to the level that I feel like I took it from just like, hey, what is football? What is college football? And made me really into the super fan that I am today, that he was the player, alongside Pat White, that made me feel this way. And it was really Slaton who kind of burst onto the scene first in 2005. We can remember kind of that Virginia Tech game in 2005, the only loss on the schedule for the Mountaineers in that historic 2005 season, that Slaton overtook Jason Gwaltney, who, remember, was the first 5-star player that West Virginia football had ever received a commitment from, at starting running back, kind of a unsung 3-star recruit from Levittown, Pennsylvania, who had his offer pulled from James Franklin, ironically, at the University of Maryland, and then signing with West Virginia along in the same class as Gwaltney. Taking over that starting role in that Virginia Tech game, and then having one of the historic performances in West Virginia football history the next week against Louisville. And then parlayed that into an unbelievable true freshman season. That's what made me kind of fall in love within that golden era of West Virginia football there from 2005 to 2007 was Steve Slaton, Super Steve, and all that he could do in the spread rush read option attack. So I would also just say perhaps maybe a bit overshadowed by Pat White. And that's really because Pat White played 4 seasons, won 4 bowl games, played the quarterback position that is the number 1 position on the football field. And in terms of importance, I guess you could say. I would say that Steve, really kind of played the Robin to Pat White's Batman. Also, Slaton, leaving early for the NFL draft as his junior season, not playing really in the Gator Bowl and the Fiesta Bowl. So, but had an incredible career in just 3 seasons in Morgantown. He's absolutely deserving of this award. Looking up his statistics all time for the Mountaineers, 3,923 rushing yards on 664 carries. That's a 5.9 yards per carry average, 109 yards per game, 50 rushing touchdowns in 36 games. I don't know if we're ever going to see that again in Morgantown. Absolutely sensational, scoring the rock, putting it into the end zone. WVU's all-time leader in rushing touchdowns, also added 65 receptions, for 805 yards and 5 touchdowns. Consensus first team All-American in 2006 when he finished 4th in the Heisman voting that year. Set the record for rushing yards in the Sugar Bowl on January 2nd, 2006 when he rushed for 204 yards with 3 touchdowns on 26 carries. In West Virginia's 38-35 victory over SEC champion Georgia. And remember, West Virginia was 33-4 during Super Steve's time in Morgantown. And just one more point to add as to why I'm so happy for him. And 12 to 14-year-old Carson absolutely loves Super Steve. This was the second of two Steve Slaton jerseys. You can see this is the old school 2004 to 2006 or jerseys that the Mountaineers wore. You can see it's partially coming apart, and I would really not wear this if I had so to choose in public. I still just keep it as a memento. It's an adult medium. That's kind of, I bought jerseys big, to grow into when I was a young kid, so I kept them. The funny thing is, still even around the shoulders, I don't know what Nike was doing with the way that it made jerseys back then, is it still fits me around the shoulders really well. And as someone who has pretty broad shoulders, this jersey feels completely comfortable from the armpit cuff down. And I wore the first one so much to school whenever I was in intermediate school that fell apart. You can kind of see down here that the numbers are starting to fray. You got kind of the screen printed on, piece that kind of pulls off a little bit. And more so, it's worse on the back. But had this jersey, and then when West Virginia switched to its style in 2007, Super Steve's biggest fan had to get a 2007 new type of jersey. So this one, really cool, probably one of the coolest pieces that I have as a Mountaineer fan. When I was a little kid, I went to the West Virginia autograph signings there in the spring. What do we call it? Fan Day, around the spring game. And this is signed by a ton of players from the 2006 to, I'd say, 2008 teams. I see, some autographs. The best one I have on the front, on the collar here, Noel Devine. But, taking a quick look around, I'm seeing a Stedman Bailey, Scooter Berry, Logan Heasty, believe it or not, Josh Jenkins, Jarrett Brown, Jock Sanders, Sean Alston, Ryan Stanchek on the front. I also have Quentin Andrews, who loved Quentin Andrews there in those middle school years. Dan Moses, and I think that's kind of all that I can make out. Oh, Reed Williams here on the front. So, man, I wear this only in special occasions, kind of my lucky Mountaineer jersey. Tried to preserve the signatures as best as humanly possible, so try not to get it too dirty so that it needs to be washed. But so all that's said and done, had 3 Steve Slaton jerseys. Absolutely loved the guy. So for this video, now 8 minutes in, it's just an ode to him. I want to talk about his my 5 favorite Steve Slaton games. So number 5, I'll work 5 to 1, is at Mississippi State in 2006. Slaton had 26 carries for 185 yards. That's a 7.1 yards per carry average with a touchdown. And he and Pat White absolutely put the SEC on notice. In addition to how West Virginia won that game in Atlanta, the Nokia Sugar Bowl in 2006, in back-to-back years, 2006 to 2007, West Virginia in a home-and-home series. I know Mississippi State isn't the Alabama or the LSU, it's in the kind of the bottom tier alongside a Vanderbilt, a Kentucky, kind of, throughout that era. But to go down to Stark Vegas, and on the very first offensive play, Pat White takes it, 80 yards to the house. Slaton finishing that day with 185 yards rushing. That was just a statement era. You can remember West Virginia in 2008 hosted Auburn. It was a pretty poorly played game by the Mountaineers. That 2008 season was kind of in flux, but West Virginia won. Lost in a rainstorm, hurricane under Jarrett Brown's leadership in 2009. But throughout that, half decade there, that the SEC, if West Virginia had the kind of resources, the kind of facilities, the kind of, kept the same sort of passion where it was, filling out Milan Puskar Stadium to the same degree. It was continuing to rate so well on TV games, that I think that West Virginia, the SEC, I really do think it came down to a coin flip decision that the SEC decided upon Missouri instead of West Virginia and bringing them into the SEC. And West Virginia having to fend for itself when the Big East fell apart because of Syracuse and Pitt leaving for the ACC and West Virginia having to join the Big 12. I don't know. But if the SEC would have wanted to do it differently, I don't think that Missouri has... and then, they've, I think, made the SEC championship game once or twice, but have they really acclimated into the conference, kind of have a natural geographic rivalry with, say, an Arkansas, now that they have Oklahoma, now that they have Texas in the league, in some respects to a Texas A&M, another Big 12 previous opponent. It was really like Missouri, 6 of one, half dozen of the other, if West Virginia would have joined the SEC instead. But what I mean to say, what I'm trying to get to is, through Steve Slaton, through Pat White, through Rich Rodriguez, everyone through that era there, and putting the SEC on notice in the Sugar Bowl and those games against Mississippi State proved that West Virginia had that kind of caliber, that it could go in and compete with anybody in that conference. And I think that earned West Virginia some respect points that still last to this day. I know that, the state of South Carolina, West Virginia fans can really take it over down there at Myrtle Beach over the summer. Ran into many a Mountaineer fans, many a Mountaineer bars down there, even in Myrtle Beach. And that's where I would say, that's where it kind of starts. Also, up into Virginia, but, no SEC schools right there. But, there is respect. There definitely was, and I still think that it lingers with some of the older fans, the younger fans. Anyone pretty much younger than me doesn't have that same kind of respect that the older crowd, I would say, has for West Virginia in those fan bases, and still thinks of West Virginia still in terms of that program from the Big East days, and still can remember the way that West Virginia put some of those teams, and then especially Clemson in the Sugar Bowl in 2012 with Geno Smith, Tavon Austin, and Stedman Bailey on notice. So that was awesome, that performance. Now I think 4 pretty easy picks. For 2006 against Maryland, Steve Slaton for West Virginia did not have the chance to go against Maryland in 2005 on the road. That was still early on in the season when Gwaltney and others were trying to get into the rotation to take upon that starting running back role. But it was a Thursday night matchup in Morgantown. I'll never forget this. It's one of the most amazing plays. Steve goes left all the way to the far sideline, cuts back, gets a block, runs down the sideline, scoots between a couple of defenders, and scores this touchdown that just fans go berserk. ESPN announcers don't know what to say about it. And, I know that at that point in time, James Franklin had left Maryland, but, Steve Slaton kind of saying, "I told you so," in the face of Ralph Friedgen and the Maryland Terrapins. He would do that again to Maryland in 2007. He just was always a thorn in the side to the Twerps after they passed on him out of high school. 21 carries for 195 yards and 2 touchdowns in that contest in 2006, a game I will never forget. Looking at the statistics, actually, for Slaton over his career, did extremely well against Marshall, did extremely well against Cincinnati, did extremely well against Syracuse. So Maryland just one of the many victims of Super Steve Slaton during his 3 seasons as part of the Mountaineer program. Number 3, at Pitt, 2006, the backyard brawl. Statistically, maybe his greatest performance, right up there with the Louisville game. 23 carries, 215 yards, and 2 touchdowns. 6 catches for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns, putting Darrelle Revis on notice. I know that game in 2006 is always talked about for the Darrelle Revis punt return, but it was Slaton and White passing for 200 yards, rushing for 200 yards, and Slaton putting up this kind of performance that willed the old gold and blue to victory. Didn't win the Big East Conference that season in 2006, losing to South Florida, losing to Louisville in a tough Thursday night contest, but to win the backyard brawl in Pittsburgh in that kind of dominating performance in which Pat White is mocking the Panther meow over on the sideline. Absolutely loved that. Never forget that. Was there in attendance. So number 2, I'm going to put the Nokia Sugar Bowl. It's hard to say. I still feel like somewhere Greg Blue is in the secondary, feeling bewildered as Steve Slaton just blazes right by him, putting that SEC speed on notice of what Slaton had there in 2006. So a record for the Sugar Bowl, 204 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns. We can recall from that game, West Virginia went up early, scored to go up 28-0 in the onset of the second quarter under DJ Shockley, Greg Lumpkin, so many studs there for Georgia under head coach Mark Richt in their own backyard. This was after there was a traumatic, there was Hurricane Katrina, and then I can't recall if maybe I'm mixing this up, so I don't want to miss this up, with the Sugar Bowl, in which there was a mining accident in the state of West Virginia. I think there were some miners trapped who were eventually saved. I don't know if that was from that, again, with the Sugar Bowl, if it was that Fiesta Bowl, but it just seemed like there was, West Virginia was playing with a chip on its shoulder, this ragtag group, of players all bounded together from the Big East Conference going down to the home state of the mighty Georgia Bulldogs, had this national news story in the news, and like West Virginia's going to go on and take them in the onset of the Hurricane Katrina, moving the game from New Orleans to Atlanta. So, and it was because, I feel like, of Steve Slaton and just Phil Brady and just an unbelievable hard edge effort by those Mountaineers that night. That was a game you'll never forget if you were a Mountaineer fan. All 3 of the BCS Bowl games, Fiesta Bowl, Orange Bowl, in 2008 and 2012, respectively. So number 1 for my career, for Steve Slaton's career, October 15th, 2005, versus Louisville, 46-44, triple overtime victory, 31 carries, 188 yards, and 5 touchdowns as a true freshman, really. I think in like his first true start. I don't know if that Virginia Tech game counted as his first true start, but then definitely the Louisville game. This game is historic for so many reasons. So many reasons. The Wally Pipp situation in which Adam Bednarik gets injured late. West Virginia comes back from, what was it, a 24-9, point deficit with under a few minutes to play. White comes in, leads West Virginia on a charge, scores to go into overtime. That triple overtime just seemed like West Virginia was absolutely dead in the water, and then found arguably its best quarterback in school history from that game. And the rest is history, alongside Slaton and White and what they were able to do under Rich Rodriguez's tutelage in the spread read option attack that he had. With that amazing offensive line, Darrell Jallow, Brandon Miles, Darius Raynaud, so many studs there on that West Virginia offense, and that was the catalyst. That was the game against Louisville that changed everything for Slaton, for White, for that program just taking off, and to win it in a triple overtime game in which I just remember being there, toward the end. I was at like a family friend's house. I think we were listening to Tony Caridi's call on the radio, just because it was kind of, like a fall gathering, kind of like party situation. Not a West Virginia party, but one of those things that I was dragged to as a kid, and trying to listen to the game, and you think West Virginia's dead in the water, and they come all the way back and win it. So things that I will just to conclude this video now, 19 minutes in, I really do wish things would, and this is why, give Super Steve this award for all that he gave to college football, because I really do just wish things would have went differently for him in the NFL, retiring at the age of 25, just 45 games over 4 NFL seasons, despite rushing for 1,282 yards and 9 touchdowns as a rookie in 2008. And what I really think happened, and this is why, going from 2006 when he had over 1,700 yards, finished 4th in the Heisman voting, as I mentioned, I think that he tried putting on weight going into the 2007 season. he kind of tried to play up to, I feel like, about a 220 level, trying to bulk up a little too much, and it cost him just that extra step. Was able to still, I feel like run over people at will. Still was 1,000-yard rusher, but when his yards per carry average dropped from 2006 to 2007 from 7 to 5. The addition of Noel Devine, still had Owen Schmidt, still had Pat White trying to rush the ball. There were so many rushers getting involved in 2007 there. Slaton trying to bulk up to impress for the NFL scouts, prove that he has the size, rather than playing it like his optimal weight of 195 to 205, just a different game 20 years ago there. Just cost him that one step of speed that he made him from, above average to great, from great to elite. So that's what, when he dropped back down, I feel like to his optimal playing weight, got his speed back, balled out in the NFL, but they call it the not for long league for a reason, and unfortunately broke his neck, suffered severe nerve damage in 2009. Don't know if it was something that, perhaps he tweaked something in, say, 2006. Remember when he had those fumbling issues in 2006 is where it started, that Louisville game, namely. If it got worse with a severe neck injury, I would think naturally in the National Football League, just never really was the same player. And then when Arian Foster came onto the scene in 2010 for the Texans, that was basically it for Slaton in Houston. He was traded to Miami, then retired from football, ultimately becoming a chef in Houston, so awesome for him. I remember being a MySpace friend with him back there in those middle 2000s when MySpace was the cool thing that people did back then, before Facebook came along, then Twitter and so on and so forth. So getting to see, I think he had a son pretty young there, Xavier Slaton. So hey, he might already be college age by now. Just goes to show how old I am. But look up his Instagram page, Phase 2 Chef. You get to see some of the awesome things that he makes. So it seems like he's made a career beyond the game of football in a different realm. But I hope now, with the way that Rodriguez is back within the program, how close to the program Pat McAfee is, Noel Devine being an analyst, I hope that with this college football nomination that he could be, say, an honorary captain for the West Virginia team in the Backyard Brawl September 13th. I hope Ren Baker and the WVU administration makes it happen, have some sort of public acknowledgement at some home game. I don't want it to be one of these irrelevant, sorry I'm saying this, but that's how I feel about the Big 12 conference. One of these home games against, say, a Colorado or a Utah, which West Virginia has no history. Make it Pitt, bring Slaton back for that game, and honor him there in front of a packed house. He deserves it. West Virginia should admonish him, and I hope that he has great ties with the program moving forward, because he is one of the icons, I feel like, of the West Virginia football program. I think it's a great honor, great acknowledgement of his career. I think he and Darren McFadden were the best in college football of those years. Please do not make me pick between the two of those. That would, the heart, my heart has Slaton. You watch the highlights, and I lived through that experience. Darren McFadden was absolutely freaking incredible there in the mid-2000s. Some other ones who then did have either successful or not successful NFL careers: Marshawn Lynch, Jamal Charles, Beanie Wells, Ray Rice, Mike Hart. The list goes on, and Slaton was right there near the top of them. Awesome to play with on NCAA football in the mid-2000s when you had Steve Slaton and Pat White. I mean, you were just unstoppable running that offense on the video game. So congratulations, Steve Slaton. You'll always have a fan in me. Thanks for tuning into this video. If you liked it, please hit that like button so more Mountaineer fans can see it around YouTube, and love to have you as a subscriber. I'm going to have another video, kind of do a double feature for you here. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Love to have your comments here on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in. Hail West Virginia, spot the ball.